Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Wireheads podcast. We are a Cyberpunk Red podcast most of the time. This week, we will be talking about more Cyberpunk Red. Trust me, we have topics that are cross-applicable to other games as well. Sometimes we even play those other games. As always, my name is Emmerron. I am one of the two creators on here. I am a Cyberpunk Red GM. Over on StartPlaying, and I stream here sometimes as well. This week is a subathon for me. That said, there's no timer up on the screen right now, simply because I would be streaming at this time even if it weren't subathon week. So you'll see a goal below my head on my stream. That is where we currently sit. If you would like to contribute during the stream, we'll add that onto the timer when I stream again for the subathon officially tomorrow. But that all said, that's me. And then, of course, joining me as always is my co-host.
Hi, everybody. I'm Diamond Dust. I mainly work on over at StartPlaying as a GM as well. Well, I wish I could say mainly. I mean, full-time night guard, part-time professional GM, and also streamer mainly over here on Twitch. Still working on YouTube, getting the Shadow Scar video put out there. But yes, this is mainly a Cyberpunk Red podcast, except for when it's not. But right. Even then, it's usually somehow related to Cyberpunk Red.
Yeah, either it's made by RTG like Shadow Scar is, or the genre matches. Yeah, the genre aligns. Unless it's Dragonbane, in which case you have neither of those things. But you know, that's okay. Dragonbane's a great game.
Yeah.
And I will proselytize about it. You don't have to. Don't worry. You don't have to ask. I'll do it.
I mean, I mean, we talk mainly about Cyberpunk Red, but we also cover other games.
We do.
And, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, the many different stories that come with those games. Which, hey, speaking of stories, how about we get to today's topic?
So my topic for the week that I'm bringing, because we will have two topics this week. Last week, we kind of got jump scared and got a DLC. And so we need to talk about that. And boy, howdy, was there a lot to talk about. There's so much, in fact, that on my personal stream Monday, because of the holiday, we didn't have Neon Inferno. Me and Nyla yapped our heads off about that. I'll probably edit that video together tonight once we're done with the podcast, so that all of you on YouTube can see what we yapped about.
I wish I could have joined you.
Yeah, two hours straight. Just talking about all kinds of fun upgrades and stuff. I mean, you were in chat. We got some feedback from you.
I know, I was just sitting in my office. It's like,
yeah, I get you.
Nothing happening.
So today, though, we're going to be talking for the first segment about writing cyberpunk stories. So the long form of this title, just so that we're clear about exactly what we're going to be discussing as we go through this. We're going to be talking about our favorite, so Diamond's and my favorite cyberpunk stories that we like to tell through the game, the ones that we avoid telling, and then the ones that we're both working on telling better. So because it's my topic, I will start things here. So I think probably my favorite cyberpunk story to write, if we're talking like a single adventure, I love heists. Heists are very, very fun. There's a reason Red Chrome Cargo to this day is quite possibly my favorite Cyberpunk Red adventure, despite it being one of the oldest standing gigs that we still have in the game today. And that's because train heists are cool. Like, train heists are cool. Stealing things from corporations is pretty cool. Like, there's a lot of really
morally acceptable too.
It's also, yeah, morally correct. But ultimately, stealing shit is fun. Stealing shit on a team is even better. And stealing shit when you have time to case the joint and do all the Ocean's 11 shit is peak. It's so good. So yeah, Red Chrome Cargo stands out, one of my favorite gigs to run of all time. And even things I've written like Pay to Win, or even Jackpot to an extent, is a heist gig. One is just a heist gig in reverse. One is you're trying to prevent the heist. The other is you're trying to get back information that was stolen. And it's like one part investigation, one part heist when you kind of figure out what's going on and how you're going to approach it. So I would say I really, really like heists. Like those are probably my favorite type of gig. And I typically go about it thinking about, okay, like what is getting stolen? What are the paths the crew might be able to take to get in? Write and define those paths out. Like, is there a network involved with the security? You know, like, are there turrets? Are there active defenses? Are the defenses more passive? Like, you know, and it forces you to think a lot more about the environment, which is nice because in any gig, you kind of want to do that, I think, in the first place. And in a heist, it's an essential. You have to know what the environment is because all of that comes into play.
And from, you know, my personal background, and just to clarify, I personally have not partaken in any major crimes whatsoever, nor minor ones on my record. Just clarifying this, I was a CJ student, and we've actually talked about the anatomy of a heist. And the way, like, I've seen you write heists and Artal writes heists, it's very much similar to the general anatomy of one. Usually heists have, like, when we look at the actual, when the heist happens, there are three things that, you know, the thieves have to look into. How are you getting into the place? What are you doing once you get there? And what to get the thing that you're looking for, and then what's your exit strategy? It's usually three specific phases, but then you also have the little inner workings that, you know, happen when you go to, you know, go case the place. Which, you know, some heists are very smash and grab. Which, I don't know, do you think Red Chrome Cargo is very much more like the smash and grab kind of heist? Or what do you feel about that one?
I would say probably it's far less, it gives far less opportunity to pre-plan it, at least as it's written, right? Like how you run it at your table could vary, right? Maybe you do allow the players some heads up, right? Maybe you preface it with some kind of conflict they have with the Red Chrome Legion ahead of time, and on one of the bodies you find intel that suggests that this thing's gonna go down, and so they get a little more of an opportunity to, like, if not case the actual train that's going, they can research its model, they can research its defenses, they can go in more prepared in that way, like at least armed with general knowledge, if not the knowledge specific to that one that they're gonna heist, where the cargo is located, all that shit, right? So I would say, yeah, it's definitely, as written though, it's more of a smash and grab. You're basically pulling up to the side of the train, you jump over into the train, you break into the train, you kill everybody inside most likely, and you take your shit back. That's pretty much what that is. Yeah, you. Whoa. Okay, Diamond, look. You don't have to.
It's Red Chrome Legion. They actually aren't people. All right.
Look, okay. Sometimes I do the killing. Sometimes it's my friend Smith and his brother Wesson, and the other time it's Sir Isaac Newton. So it's okay. You know, one of us will get him. But
and of course, like with my. And like with my heist, Hungry for Violence, you are contracted by, Molly Anderson, because Old Combat Zone, like, their people are starving. Yes. So, because Continental Brands is punishing, the combat zones for multiple, break-ins, trying to leave with extra rations than they should. So when the Food Corporation doesn't want to give out food that they have, what do? You go fucking fuck up the truck, you steal the truck, and you take the truck.
And then hopefully you remember to take out the trackers. That's very important.
Then you torch the truck.
Then you torch the truck. Yeah, see, it's the boxes you have to worry about the trackers in now. That's
exactly.
Sometimes they do have trackers, so you have to be, like, meticulous about that shit. But yeah, no, it's very important.
Yeah. And then sometimes you have the much more quiet heist, sort of like what like you mentioned, like with Ocean's 11, where it's very much more. One that I can really think of, especially a heist that I was involved in game, was basically cleaning out a Jinguji that happened to make some very bold boasts towards Torel and Chang. So
I love that.
Jinguji was getting ready to show off like their latest, spring collection. And we decided that, just the night before opening, we were going to go in, we were going to help ourselves to the stock, and it's going to end up somewhere in the bottom of Morro Bay. And nobody knew until opening day.
I need to know something about Jinguji, because I'm like, I use them way too often.
They're around, because they are around in the time of the red. Because, we have, in the Cyber Chair DLC, the woman's wearing Jinguji boots.
Oh, wait, what? Hold
Yeah.
up.
Did you never know? Did I once again notice the detail? I
overlooked that. I mean, to be fair, it's been quite a while since I've looked at the Cyber Chairs DLC closely. So that
this is a recurring pattern, by the way, folks. I noticed something, Emmerron. What?
What do you mean? Yeah, holy fuck, you're right. That is.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. That's cool.
There's Thompson with, Jinguji boots.
That's sick. Okay. Because, that is... Okay. Because, I use them so much. And I'm like, I didn't even know if they were around or not. But I'm like, well, at the very least, they probably are in, like, their startup phase. They're not a megacorp. Or even, like, the larger corporation that we see in 77. Because clearly they've gotten quite big in 77 because they've got outlets all over the city in addition to their main one in the downtown area. So I'm like, yeah, they're probably starting up right now. Like that's probably the point we're at in the timeline with them. But I've recently started using them in Neon Inferno too. And I've mentioned them more than once in other games I've run too. So I'm just like, it's just funny. I'm like, oh man. So there it is. It's canonical. They do exist in the time of the red. That's very, very cool.
And yes, it is supposed to be a spoof of Gucci. See, now I'm wondering if maybe they were actually around in Cyberpunk 2020. Maybe. Who knows?
I just went on the wiki and that's what I was checking. I was like, because I know some of those brands just got copied over. They were not in 2020. They only have been written about in the context of 2077 and the CEMK, it seems. So the visual Easter egg from Red is the only indication we've gotten thus far that they are around at the time. They've not been mentioned in text from what I can tell.
And so, this was a situation where we had to go, case the joint, figure out like the ins and outs of this building, figure out the most opportune time to get in, which palms to grease. We figure out what are the high dollar items, because we weren't going to take everything because that would have been too obvious, but we were going to take the real high dollar items. Dresses, suits, and also a really nice golden pair of boots. And it was a shame that they had to go to the bottom of the bay.
Real shame.
Oh yeah.
What a shame. So sad.
Yeah, it was going to give you a +1 to your wardrobe and style. That's how they're tech upgraded boots. It's like, damn. Fuck.
What a shame. It's funny because in Neon Inferno, the last time we got together, it was all the talk about well, see, sir, for that we normally charge like 5,000 eddies. He says, see, I'm a little tight on that. And so what about 2,000? And just as they're getting ready to counter offer him, because this is Celsius, Cody's character.
Oh boy.
A Maelstrom guy, because this is during a period where there's riots all over the city because of something that Matchlight, the party's media, dropped. So this Maelstromer walks in and is like, I'm taking everything in the fucking register. Give it now. And Cody turns around and he says, I'm sorry, you're going to what? And scares the dude off and then turns back. I believe you were just getting ready to tell me 1,000. 1,000 is the price, right? and the teller's like, yes, sir. I think we could be more than amenable to that price. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see that they actually canonically exist, because this is the thing, right? And I guess on topic of what we were trying to talk about during the podcast in this segment. Don't be afraid to take liberties and leaps of faith with the content and timeline of Cyberpunk. I see it way too often, I think, with newer GMs especially, that there is a, like, I have to run this. The lore has to agree, because 2077 still needs to be possible. It doesn't. It just doesn't need to be possible at the end of your campaign. If you decide, like I did, to drop a second nuke on Night City through your party, and that lands somewhere that is like very like still inhabitable by the time of the 70s, like that doesn't matter. Like you could just have done that. And then the real fun, in my opinion, right? Because this is where you get to that original part of your storytelling, is it forces you to rethink how the world would change between those 2 points. Understanding which things would probably remain mostly constant, like these things are the canon events that are going to happen and would have happened anyway, and which ones actually are affected by the choices that your party made in that context. Which is all the fun I'm having with Neon Inferno. I wouldn't have as much fun as I am having with Neon Inferno if I was constantly worried about, like, oh man, how am I violating the space-time continuity of Cyberpunk with this one? Like, I'm just having fun. That's all I'm doing. So do not be afraid to send it off the deep end if that's what's cool and fun and appropriate. Because I think there's a lot that you can do with that.
And that's important to writing your story, is like, who gives a rat's ass at the next table over what your table is doing. As far as I see it, Cyberpunk 2077 is just us being put at the table of the story that's being told.
I think Jay said it best at Gen Con. Every story that is told in Cyberpunk is being told by some guy at a bar. And what do we know about bar stories from randos? They are unreliable.
But they sometimes have a hint of truth.
They do. They usually have a hint of truth. But they're unreliable. They're not super accurate, because you don't know how many drinks the guy's had or how much of a braggart the guy is or whatever. Like it's all over the place. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, and I suppose in my case, I personally love tales of intrigue, where of course, a good heist is fine and all, but I love to write stories of intrigue, and that will cause the players to have a real good hard look at not only what they're trying to investigate, but a good hard look at themselves. And sometimes cause players to have not characters, players to have existential crises.
Oh boy! All right, so Manic Meat just asked a question. I think Manic, stick around, because we do a Q&A at the end of each episode. I will make sure that your question makes it there, because that is a terrific question. Because it's asked about companies in Cyberpunk.
Okay.
So yeah. So now to kind of put so when you write intrigue, because we've talked a little about writing intrigue stories before, I think. Because you said you like to use like a web. You like doing like the evidence board kind of approach, where you're like writing webs of that out, right?
Yeah, however, not quite as neat sometimes, where you're gonna have that one weird red string that somehow ends up like halfway across the board. There should be no connection there, and then you all are sitting there, knee deep in just where the fuck's this connection coming from? It's just So I've gotten a player to the point where they're having the Pepe Sylvia moment, just like, Diamond, I know there's supposed to be something here. I see there's a connection here. What the fuck's the connection? And it's just like, oh, don't worry, you'll find out. You'll find out.
You'll eventually you'll see it.
And then when the tension finally breaks and all the chips fall and the bullets start flying, it makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's by the time the stakes are gonna matter, you'll know. You'll see the picture. It's gonna horrify you probably. You're gonna be like, oh yeah. I hate this. That's fine. You can hate it. You're gonna deal with it one way or another.
You know, sort of like with Eddies and Elflines, as you guys may have watched. You know, these guys ended up figuring out why Segatari's Elflines Online was doing so well. They were starting to what if instead of just programming NPCs, we took people, we put them in a nice comfy chair. We put some tubes in them, we put the headset on them, and then boom, we have NPCs.
What if we took people's brains and put them in the game? Yeah, basically. Exactly.
And then Emmerron and I, one night, I don't know if we were drinking or whatnot, just this idea of like, okay, FB, just like, just taking the biosystems, Segatari taking the biosystems and then putting the headsets on them.
Yeah, like, I think we were definitely in an altered state of mind one way or another.
We were going somewhere. Actually, yeah.
We were going places, and yeah, I was like, yeah, just think about it. Those are so much more like space efficient. So you could just like rack them up like server blades in like a server farm, and then it's like it's space efficient and like realistic still, because these people don't know that they're plugged into some grand machine. For all they know, they woke up and they're in their favorite game, and it's only after a while that
it's nice and grassy outside.
It's beautiful. Yeah,
they're not even in a game. It's a nice grassy world with some fun little beasts to go fight, and oh fuck, just getting killed literally right out the gate of the starting world. Nothing bad happens.
But you're not dead. You get to keep living over and over and over. And definitely won't suffer psychological damage long term for it ever.
And if you're a good little brain in the jar and you meet your sales quota of encouraging people to buy Elflines Gold, you get a nice little injection of your glucose. Otherwise, you get to go to retraining for your first strike. Second strike, well, we're gonna replace you. A new cast member.
New cast member. Yeah,
so, I like writing these stories where sometimes it looks way too shallow, and then suddenly they find the thin part of the ice and it goes straight down.
It's a sinkhole. It's not a shallow pit. It's a sinkhole. The other thing too about what you just said, I'm like, just the phrase, if you're a good little brain in a jar, and I'm like, oh fuck, we've crossed 3 lines on our way to get to this one. Holy shit.
Oh dear, is that my empathy one corporate research and developer show? Yeah, they didn't encounter Einstein. One of the that was the nickname of Segatari's research and development leader.
Yeah.
So, he has some great ideas for the company.
Yeah. So to move on to kind of the next category here of adventures, let's talk about the ones we actively avoid telling. Like, are there any stories in specific that you actively avoid telling when you start writing gigs for a campaign or something?
So I suppose a really big one that I really avoid. I really avoid true grimdark stories in Cyberpunk, where it's just like your choices don't fucking matter.
Oh yeah, that should never happen.
Like you know, I've seen a few GMs where, you know, it's just like, you know, hey, your edge runner, you know, your group is sent off to go, you know, fight the other side, you know, military, like, you know, it takes place during, you know, the quote unquote firestorm days, you know, 2022, 2023. And, you know, inevitably at the end of this, there's no chance of you surviving.
Right. Yeah.
And while I don't mind, you know, like a larger mass scale conflict being involved, I don't ever want to make it seem like you are nothing more than just ending up at the end of the day, you're ending up at the bottom of the wheel, getting grounded like meat. There needs I always provide I always try to provide a way up.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair too, because it's like, the thing is, I don't shy away from stories that could end with everyone dying. I think they make the stakes more interesting, if anything, when at the very end, like, everything could fall apart and the crew, because that's kind of where I think like the logical conclusion of a heist focused campaign really is, here is your one big gig. Get it right, you're set up forever. Get it wrong, you will all perish in the attempt. Or everyone that gets caught will perish in the attempt, right? Maybe some of you can still make it out, but it won't be all of you. And someone will die if something goes wrong. Like, too wrong, right? There's still like degrees of failure, but the tolerance for failure is far tighter than if you fail early in, right? If you fail early in a campaign, usually you should always have a way to dust yourself off and walk up and work on whatever caused you to trip. Late in the campaign, you're playing with fire. You're playing with some very hot fire. So like, yeah, I like those stakes. I like the way they can build. Almost every campaign I've ever run ends with a Firestorm-esque ending, I would argue. And that's something I think, like, when we get to the next category, that's something I'm trying to work on, maybe like not doing as often, because I find myself, it's a constant trap for me. I'm like, yeah, but like things are constantly escalating. So how do you not get to these things at the end?
I mean, I do believe there's a point when those things hit, but like for me, I struggle with like true, which, like, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of death in space and Cyborg. I understand the world is folding in on itself, the universe is folding in on itself.
Right.
But you are making the most of it while it can happen. So I'm a little bit more akin to I am a little more open to that one compared to,
right,
let's say, Warhammer. Warhammer fans, I'm not dogging on your game. If that's what gets your goat, play Warhammer. It's just, it's endless war with no objective.
Right. It's a bunch of smaller objectives with no like true end to the conflict in sight, and I agree. And I mean, for Warhammer, that kind of makes sense, because obviously you need a reason why, like, you and your friends line up your row of toy models against each other every
they're miniatures. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Look, I've played the game before. I have a collection of the miniatures. I know. You need an excuse for the battles to happen. So endless conflict, great excuse for that. But like, I agree. From a storytelling perspective, there's some stories you can tell in that context, but building meaningful stakes when you know there's no clean way to resolve some of that is just like, or when there's no like foreseeable way, let's say. It doesn't need to be clean, but you need to foresee a way that some of that comes to a close eventually. Or else it's meaningless. There's not a lot of meaning to be found in there. outside of that, which can be found in Pyrrhic victory over Pyrrhic victory over Pyrrhic victory. It gets boring, right? Is the problem, which you never want stories about conflict to be boring. You want them to have a purpose. And I think Cyberpunk stories are 9 times out of 10, you'll have a purpose. And even if you die, there's meaning in the death, which is why I've talked about it's okay to die, right? It's okay to die in Cyberpunk stories because it's a way to write something meaningful. It's a punctuation mark that is usually, more often than not, it's a fucking exclamation point of like, I was here, I existed, and that needs to resonate a little bit, at the bare minimum, to the characters that it mattered to. And it's not true grimdark at that point. Like, there's a purpose to the struggle. I think the hardest thing I have when I'm like trying to work out how to write a particular genre of cyberpunk story, is how to do, to a certain degree, like, I won't avoid writing investigation. What I do avoid writing are stories of like consistent, constant, like kind of to the same sort of genre you're talking about, Diamond, where it's like grimdark is maybe not the way that everyone would describe it, but I'll say that it's like stories of hopelessness. I don't like stories of hopelessness. I think stories of like consistent deprivation and hopelessness, to say nothing of the sub-themes all being very difficult subjects in and of themselves. The point of playing games is to have fun with the games, right? And if you're gonna offer hopelessness, offer it swiftly. Don't make a campaign about hopelessness. That is not a good way to do it. Make it, if you need to tell a chapter of your story, like Neon Inferno Season 2 has been a lot of this, right? Where like you take one step forward and then 2 steps back when, you don't account for all of the pieces on a chessboard. But eventually someone in the background will. And so then it's 1 step forward, 1 step back. And then eventually you'll start taking the 2 steps forward for every 1 step back that they take. So it's kind of like, okay, you slowly begin to like build a resistance. It becomes a resistance narrative instead of a one of hopelessness. You're still fighting for a cause that has a purpose, instead of it just being like, all right, well, like you live in this shitty part of town and all your shit got stolen. Your con app got broken into again for the 4th time this month. And that giant payday that you just made, they made off with the thing that made it possible. So guess you're not getting that payday anymore. Like, you never want, I feel like, to embroil your players in personalized hopelessness. If anything, you want to expose them to like hopeless people and then empower those people through your characters and the stories that they're helping to tell. And then, work backwards against that narrative rather than it being there's no point. Nihilism has no place. Like defiance in the face of what seems like a losing battle, that is much better. So I think, I don't know. What are any final thoughts on things you try to avoid and why?
One of the other major things that I personally try to avoid, and I think it's mainly, first off, it's like it's a very taboo topic, and it's also one that I don't. There are times where it's used appropriately, and it's used to help actually convey the plot well, but I don't feel that, like, you know, one of the things I have seen done really well and done really poorly. I try to avoid having children be caught in the crossfire of things.
Yeah.
Now, in the case, and like, of course, throwing it out there, Electric Dreams, they literally have it on the box that there is going to be child death. The way they handle it, though, they did a fantastic job, and I will always applaud. I will always applaud Free League for doing it well.
Yeah. Well, and they definitely don't make it the hard focus of what you're doing either. It's just it's an element in there.
It's an important factor that helps bring the story together.
Yep.
And
it's like it's a moment, and it's very fade to black on top of that.
Yeah.
So like, if you're gonna do stuff like that, like, because there are a few themes, child endangerment and death is one of those that, like, if you use them at all, you use them through implication and fading to black. If you start the supposition like, okay, this is happening, you don't get into gory detail, because goddamn, like, that is.
Yeah.
It's hard to even think about that. I think even if you're a writer, it's harder to think about that at length without getting really upset and sad and angry. Like, it's really, really hard to do that.
Yeah, I've seen some GMs do it very well, where it's, very, very, like, while yes, this happens to be something that's going on, it's not put to such a graphic depiction. However, I have been in a campaign where it became a very strong graphic depiction that happened a little too often. I'm just like, all right, dude, enough of this. We're done here.
Right. Well, and I think that, like, like, if you're gonna handle a lot of that, there's a reason that TV and games and stuff handle a lot of things where, like, if kids are in the crossfire and they are getting injured and they potentially are dying, a lot of that happens off screen until, like, if you aren't empowered in a moment to help, those moments are handled off screen until you are empowered to help. And then it brings you into the middle of it, right? Like, that's kind of how I tried to deal with it in my campaign, is like, when it became a thing that the players needed to contend with, because one of my players got really attached to Generation Red, which, for those of you who don't know Cyberpunk Red encyclopedically like we do, with some holes in our memory, collectively we have a pretty complete body of knowledge of Cyberpunk Red, I'd like to think. And Generation Red is a Yo Gang. Yo Gangs are a feature of the setting that have to exist because it wouldn't be realistic without them. Where a bunch of kids band together and they are, orphans or latchkey kids or some combination thereof, right? They are the forgotten children of a society that is sick, right? In Cyberpunk Red, the world is in turmoil still. Even if it is rebuilding, it is a chaotic world. There's a lot wrong with it. There's a lot of people in there that are, like, self-interested, and they don't give a fuck about, children or their place in that society that is kind of half fallen apart, right? So the kids, out of a need to survive, power in numbers, right? So they form gangs, and those are collectively referred to as Yo Gangs. So Generation Red is a particular group, though, that we get to see a lot about in Danger Girl Dossier. And one of my players got really attached to them. And inevitably, I knew that down the pipe, they would be in danger. Because they live in the same area the players are from. And that area, that whole section of the city, is a target of an attack. So what do? Well, you want to tell that story honestly. You don't want to, be telling a story that's dishonest about those things. But, like, what happens then? Well, the actual point where they get attacked happens off screen. And the aftermath of the attack is where the party finds them. And they're like clinging on to life. So now the party can do something. They can intervene and try to save them, which they do. And they're still dealing with like the consequences after the fact. But like the fact is, the worst of that all was done before the party ever showed up. And when they did, they had an option to help. And that's important. I think all those things need to be there if you're going to talk about some of these subjects.
And like taboo, it's not so much like I never write like long stories over like long campaigns over taboo subjects, but I will touch on them from time to time. One of the other ones that I sometimes will address, because it is something that happens in these gangs, is trafficking, whether it be, you know, people, parts, drugs. I mean, and you know, I've talked about this, and the way that I've always approached this, you know, another, you know, taboo topic that, you know, Cyberpunk even addresses is far right fascism.
Yes,
with the Red Chrome Legion. And they talk about it explicitly. It's like, you will, you know, these are problems to be addressed. You are not like it is strongly, and when I mean strongly suggested, it's very much, you will not use our system to encourage these kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. You are not there. You're not there to become a worse version of this problem. You are there to try and solve elements of it, even if you can't, like, because again, it's like they're not, Cyberpunk is not the kind of system where you are a hero, right? You're not going to solve the ideological problem with that sick society as a group, even over a very long campaign. You're not going to solve all the problems that make that society sick. But what you are going to do is come face to face with facets of them. And when you do, you're expected to contend with them exactly like that, like they are problems. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're writing your adventures and things like that. Yeah, Nihilus says, golden rule, don't be a dick. It's one thing to...
Vampire.
Yeah,
actually.
And it's also another thing he says here is creating dark situations and torturing your players are two very different things.
This is true. Vampire the Masquerade actually addresses, like, the thought I had. I tried to learn how to run Vampire. I struggle with it, but it's very much more like addressing the vampires is, you might be monsters, but don't become the monster, is how they put it.
That's, I mean, I think that rule is, it's not a bad one. What I will say is this. It's one thing, because this is a theme that gets played with a lot at the tables that I'm part of, either as a player or as a GM. What happens when you start to lose your sense of empathy for your fellow human? Like, by one person's definition, that would make you monstrous. My argument is that psychosis and mental health don't make someone monstrous by definition, but some people might look at it that way. So it's one of those things where it's like, I much prefer, if you are going to delve into dark topics, make sure that you understand with your players what is crossing a line. Do your lines and veils. Do your safety tools. Use them well. Because, and I don't know why, but I've gotten comments in the past and seen comments in the past that people are like, they don't like the idea of safety tools. Some of them thinking like, yeah, but it's a dark game, man. Like, why wouldn't you use safety tools? Or like, why would you use safety tools to tell a mature, dark story? Because, and this is very, very, very important, especially because we are telling dark stories in some of these cases. It is deeply important that you and your group have an understanding on what a line too far is. What makes a monster in this case, right? Where do you cross the line from being like a potentially misunderstood element of society, the counterculture, a punk, right? Where do you cross the line from being a punk to being a monster? And like, where are the ethical lines in there for you and your group? Because you can talk about those subjects, but it's like anything, right? If you're talking into darkness, you need to understand where is a step too far and when to stop talking about that. Because it's not healthy for you in real life to do that to a deep extent for too long, right? Stare into the abyss too deeply, and it will stare back into you. You have to remember that as a golden rule when you're talking about those topics, even if you're part of a group that by and large say we don't have lines, we don't have like a huge number of topics that are problematic for us, because I run groups like that. Even then, I treat those subjects with respect. They deserve it.
Like for me, like one of my veils, and sometimes borderline depending on like who the target is in question. I personally am not a big fan of just executing helpless people.
Yep.
Now, folks like members of the Red Chrome Legion, they have done things that it's just like you don't deserve to live at this point.
Well, you no longer, because then we get into the discussion of who is innocent, right? Because it's that there are times where you'll have someone who's surrendered, and you might say that's an innocent person, but if the person who surrendered is part of a group that you're like, well, you no longer qualify as a person, right? Or the things that you are in support of here make you so unredeemable in my eyes that you're no longer, I could never qualify this person as innocent.
Which is why I have a hard time like just doing, executing in general, unless, it is like that scene where it's, last words before you put a bullet through, your nemesis' head. That's right. One thing. But you're dealing with someone like some scrappy little scab, and they are begging for their life. I have played low empathy characters, but I can't bring myself to kill someone like that.
Yeah, well, and then Nyla brings up a great point, and then there's a discussion beyond that even of like, are you the one fit to play judge and jury all at once? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yep, that's a great point too. Yeah.
I understand that does cause a slippery slope. It's just personally, I really get real uncomfortable with that because and it's not as much of a slippery slope in my opinion. It's more of like okay, where do you draw a line? On like, because there are times, that's why we have veils, right? That is the whole concept of a veil. Is like, I don't know where I'll draw the line in the contexts that we could be playing in, but understand that the line is somewhere in this gray area, and we need to understand that I could call a stop to a scene or request that we fade to black. And that's okay. Because, like, again, sometimes we don't even know. Like, I in the last couple of days, have come to I've come to an understanding of certain elements of body horror as they apply in like in Baldur's Gate, because that's what I've been mostly playing on Subathon so far. There's some body horror stuff that happens in that game in particular that I'm just like, fuck, dude, this is really hard to watch. And I did not know until I saw that and started to experience that I'd probably qualify elements of that as a veil for me. And I'm like, and I'm very like, yeah, cyberware, fuck yeah. Some of the body horror around like transhumanism and stuff like that, totally okay with that. Some of the body horror in fantasy, that is a fucking problem. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But then I suppose finally, What was your third one that you were looking at, by the
Yeah,
way?
so the third element is what stories are we trying to tell better, and kind of how are you working toward that? For my part, I would say it's investigation, because investigation is always really tricky, because like you need to put a careful balance together of like breadcrumbs and not giving everything away. And that's been one I've been working on for a while. It's like a combo of that and not escalating things too quickly in a wider campaign context. Because escalation is needed, especially when it's earned. You don't get the end of Cyberpunk Edgerunners unless you get all the escalation that happens between the beginning and that ending. But you also need to, like, there's a certain level of like, because Jay brought this up recently on Twitter, where he's like, there comes a point in every Cyberpunk campaign where I think the GMs believe that the street needs to be, it needs to grow beyond street level. It needs to escalate somehow beyond street level. And I'll be the first one to admit that I'm guilty of that to a point, because I really like that element of escalation. And I think this is also one of the soft rules, right? It's not one of those things that like every table's going to need to work according to like perfect doctrine Cyberpunk, right? That said, I think that there's a purpose to try, right? There's a point in trying to avoid escalation to a massive degree for as long as you can, while still keeping the story believable. And so I'm trying to, that's like the gray area I'm trying to parse out, like, where do we draw that line? And then an investigation, just trying to work better at like not giving everything away, because it's fun to watch players figure it out. And you're getting excited as the GM, I think, sometimes when you're watching your players learn something, you're like, fuck, I want to give things away. And you have to like restrain yourself. You're like, I want to tell them so badly. It's like waiting for your friend to open up a gift you've bought them for a holiday or something. Like you're like, oh, I want like their birthday present. I want to see them open that and get all excited about what I got them. But I need to wait for them to open it. And I bought this 3 weeks before, and fuck, that's hard. It's like that. So getting better about developing a pacing and a balance to that pacing for that. Those are like the two things I would say like I'm really working on right now in my writing.
Now, I suppose in my case, I've struggled with tragedy. I struggle with tragedy. And I mean, you've seen it in my campaigns. Like then again, you know, players are usually fight tooth and nail for getting their ability to walk away, you know, with their lives. But I've struggled with trying to find that right balance of like the players gathering success, but like, you know, making sure I hit hard enough that they have had to have earned it. And if they aren't ready to take the hit, that, you know, something does fall on their side. And I've had a couple of character deaths that were impactful, but like I've never really had anything like truly notable of like something that is like really devastating to the party. So that is something I struggle with, because, you know, like we all want to see our players succeed. We all do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just like, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, my, like, you know, I enjoy the struggle that Cyberpunk Red puts in front of us. But but tragedy is something that I have struggled with, because every Cyberpunk, like like's been said, there's no happy endings in Cyberpunk. Like, there's always a cost for everything. But I don't know if I've really ever hit that point where I've done well with it.
I think you did great with it at the end of Control Alt Delete, with that particular one where like everything is culminating and things are happening at like by the second, right? Like you have to make a split second, quite literally, decision on like whether you help someone, because you're costing yourself precious seconds trying to do something altruistic. And yeah, like sometimes that doesn't shake out. And so it's like, I still sit with the fact that like, okay, Joe's character died because I chose to save myself. And the reality is that if I hadn't done that, or if I had chose to help her rather, instead of helping just myself and getting out of there, I probably would have died because I needed the failure that I saved. Because you basically said you got one failure, and then after that, if you fail again, it's over. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm like that. If those are the stakes, then I can't afford to turn around right now. Larry wouldn't be the kind to turn around. He's too selfish. Even if he's been a little more selfless recently and he owes these people, he can't bring himself to like avoid that part of himself here. Not when, pedal meets metal, right? I think there's an art in tragedy, because I've had to write a lot of it in the way that the stories just happen, right? Characters die, and when they die, like there's tragedy in that, right? And so I think a lot of it, you don't necessarily write tragic stories when you write for a TTRPG, right? In general, I think you write a high stakes story, and what comes out of it, a resolution of it, could be a tragic one, right? And then
that might be what it is I'm looking for, is like raising the stakes and meeting the party where they are.
Well, and not being afraid that you could kill them. I think that was the biggest block that I needed to overcome when I was new to running Cyberpunk, was at what point is it okay to threaten all of your player characters with death? Like in one fell swoop, you could just kill all of them. And there is a very narrow line, very thin, that like you walk when you start trying to figure that one out. Because again, we're supposed to have fun. Mm-hmm. But I think that there is like when everyone dies in a blaze of glory, and I've likened it to if the way the party dies is falling out of the sky in an AV in an attempt to get away from the heist they've just like fucking solved, right? They've done everything right up to the point that they drew too much attention, and their getaway is fraught with the risk that they could just fall out of the sky. If everyone dies in that AV crash at the end, it was still worth it, because you had all the adrenaline leading into that. The payoff is still that, you did everything right up until it went wrong. And there is a novelty in that concept. What you don't want is when a player to die, that they just bled out in a back alley somewhere and the death didn't matter, right? There was nothing gained by that character dying. Blaze of glory is the way to kind of remember it. If the scenario you presented them presents the players and their characters that blaze of glory finish, regardless of how it ends, it will be satisfying. And it's okay to really challenge them and force them up against the wall and be like, what are you going to do about it? Those are the best stories, in my opinion, no matter how they end. If everyone's crying at the end of it and it was an adrenaline soaked adventure, it's worth it. The tragedy that follows is earned in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's my take at least.
And I suppose in the case of like one of the other things that I do struggle with, I know we're kind of going over time for your half of the episode here, but I do feel this is like one other important thing that I've been kind of learning to work on.
Sure.
While it is something I do like to write, I guess sometimes I have a real hard grasp. I have a hard time really grasping how bad corporations can get. Because to understand, or also like city life, that's another thing. To understand, I am literally corn-fed, out in the middle of. I grew up out in the middle of, corn-fed bumfuck out somewhere in Iowa. All right, I am about as far, like where I grew up. I was pretty far away from most things. Didn't even have a gas station in the village I grew up of 69 people.
Nice.
All right. Yeah, not nice when it turns out most of them are married but also related. Yeah, one of those kinds of places. So somehow we weren't part of the family tree. Fun fact. Anyway, the thing that I just find that's hard for me to grasp is like how fucked up cities and these massive megacorps can be.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you understand the human ego and its desire for power and to be right about everything at all times, regardless of the scenario, you start to get a pretty good idea, even if you don't live in a city. Because like I've lived in a city most of my life. I've been exposed to rural America because I had grandparents that were farmers, literally. And my parents owned a small cottage that had been like passed through my dad's side of the family. And so I spent tons of time in rural Wisconsin doing that. So like I got out of the city enough to understand what that looked like, and how that didn't change a lot of the aspects underpinning society. If anything, rural America has some of that worse because they're the people being exploited more often than not. People in the cities are just as exploited in certain ways, but like it looks different. Out in rural America, you at least have like there's a line to separate out, there's a gap there somewhere that says like, oh, but I'm doing this for me, right? Like, because you're not sitting in some office building directly landlocked to your corporation or the people that control those aspects of your life. You have the illusion that you've separated yourself from them. There's a degree of separation there. And they don't, in some cases, see where that happens in the middle. Like there is still a man in the middle. They're still coming through. They're still gonna take you for everything you're worth. And like the failure to recognize that is why this isn't gonna get better for you, because you somehow think the tax break is the very small bit of politics that comes through. Because this is the part that it matters for in Cyberpunk. The bottom line is any tax break they talk about is for the billionaire, not for you, who's barely making ends meet and putting food on your table, right? And I think that is something that, like in the city, you become far more acutely aware of it because we provide less for ourselves, right? You look at the grocery store and you're like, why are eggs $7 a dozen, right? Where if you grow up in a community that is a farmer's market where like fresh eggs are a thing, like you might not be seeing that as deeply, right? Like that might not be as obvious because the source is like there, right? So you still feel the poverty to an extent, but you feel it less acutely in some of those aspects of your life. Whereas in the city, it's like, I do computer stuff for a corporation, or I sit at a desk for a corporation, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, never really catching a break of that.
Yeah.
And there's a separation for sure.
To understand, I've worked as a night guard where, we were contracted to, cover some parts of the city or, certain neighborhoods or certain housing developments. And I've seen some bad shit. But apparently that is an easy night for, a cop out in LA or a cop out in New York or Chicago.
100%. Yep.
I've only had I only have enough use of force cases to count on one hand.
Yeah.
So
and
that's
and that's the thing. Like growing up in Chicago, I lived in the good part of Chicago. I lived on like the north side, pretty damn close to the suburbs. Like 2 blocks away, we were in a suburb. So it's like I lived in the city limits. Because my dad was a cop, but I got to hear all of his stories, and you understand better, I think, the darker elements of society and like what poverty leads to, in that way, because it's, at least in rural America, you have your community to help you. Urban America is very siloed, very pigeonholed. You have no one really helps anyone else.
I guess in the case of my exposure to rural America though, sure there may be a little bit of kindness to one another to a degree, as long as you are, and it's kind of what's kind of helped me get my mind wrapped around like some of these gangs where it's like, yeah, we'll help you because you're part of you look like us, you talk like us. You're on the end. Yep. However, that guy looks different. Kill him.
He's got the wrong chrome. Throw him off the bridge. Yep.
So yeah, that's that's some of the things that I do struggle with is like some of those concepts.
Yeah. You've got a pretty good grasp of it though, because I've never been in like a game that you've been running and thought like, oh, you completely missed how this is supposed to work. It's always with the tiny subcultural things that I'm like, oh, you didn't know that was a thing, like with the trading card game thing, which is, It's usually the harmless stuff that like, if you're gonna have any degree of inaccuracy, it's all the really niche subculture shit. It's not the broader conflicts and the strokes that accompany them.
I tell you what, though, if Skimmer dies, the Midwestern, the northern Midwesterners are coming to town. Oh, God. I tell you that.
That's exciting.
We're bringing our hot dish with us too. Anyway.
Oh God. Yeah. So
I will break out the accent, but
yeah.
Moving on to.
We'll move to section 2. It's not a question so much as a. Nyla pointed out something I wish that I saw more in Cyberpunk campaigns is something it isn't, and you say it isn't meant to have these things, but it's surprisingly, I think you're actually wrong, which is fun and comedy. You can tell some great comedy gigs. Like there's one coming up in Tales of the Red, probably relatively soon for you guys, that is almost all not meant to be taken that seriously. Like it's very it's not that it's not meant to be taken seriously, but the subject matter is far lighter than what we've been dealing with.
If it's the one I think it is, it's great results.
Yeah,
great time. Also may need some rope for the back of the Gorgon on that one.
Oh boy. But yeah, I think at this point we've kind of talked this into the ground. And like I will I'll probably make a note of that as its own episode topic. How to inject comedy and levity into Cyberpunk, because like that deserves its own like hour-long space to talk about it, because there's a lot you can do with that. But that's going to do it for my half of the episode this week, everybody. So if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, we are now going to go to Diamond's channel. The link to her half of our episode will be down in the description below. So you can all watch that. Of course, if you are listening to this or watching this on Spotify, or if you're here with us live on Twitch as we record it, which we do at roughly 4:30 p.m. Pacific time every Thursday, then you are going to just stick around where you are, get comfortable, refresh your water, your snacks, etc. We're going to be continuing on here. But for those of you on YouTube, I hope all of you have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you're in the world. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see you all in the next half of the episode and very soon in other videos as well. Peace, guys.
Bye-bye.